I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. And what you're going to learn today is that I sometimes leave footage on my hard drive for weeks or months at a time and forget that I shot a video and edited a video and then didn't release the video. When I reviewed the Emax Babyhawk 4-inch, the 4-inch Emax racing drone, I also made a setup video showing how you go through the initial setup, and then I didn't release it. I don't know why I didn't release it. So, you know what? I do know why I didn't release it. Because I didn't shoot an intro for it. I did all the setup stuff, and then I forgot to shoot like an intro or an outro, and then I just forgot it existed. So, here's the intro. And if you just got a Babyhawk 4-inch and you want to know how to set it up, here's how to do it. Oh, where we go. Here in the computer, I'm going to start up the Betaflight configurator, and we're just going to do a little bit of checking to make sure that we're ready to go. If this is your first quad and you've never installed Betaflight configurator, I have a video, Betaflight setup for absolute beginners, that walks you through the very first steps of installing this guy, installing the drivers. I'm going to assume you've got all that done. If not, there is a link down in the video description, and that's what you need. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the receiver tab, and unfortunately, the receiver on this guy is not powered from USB, so I'm going to need to plug in the battery. Now that I've got the battery plugged in, I can see that things are not right. Look, the quadcopter down here is flipping out, and you can't see my transmitter, but right now I'm going to raise my throttle. And do you see that as I'm raising and lowering my throttle, the pitch channel is moving? All of my controls are mixed up, and the reason for that is that the channel mapping is incorrect. The channel mapping is the order that your first 4 control channels will come in. Right now, Betaflight is expecting roll to be channel 1, pitch to be channel 2, yaw to be channel 3, and throttle to be channel 4. That is not how my transmitter is set up. That's okay. I could reorder the transmitter, but instead, I'm just going to use this, and actually this preset, this preset is the one that I believe that I use. Now, if you find that the presets, there's several presets here, if you find that these presets are not right for you, you can just manually rearrange A, E, T, R into the order that you think they should be to rearrange your first 4 control channels. And now, throttle, yaw, pitch, and roll are correct, but there's another problem. And the next problem is that my endpoints are not correct. Look at my endpoints here. It's 991 with my throttle all the way down. If I push my throttle all the way up, it's 2011. And you're actually going to see that that is the same for all 4 of the control channels. Now, there's 2 ways to fix that. One of them is to adjust the endpoints in your transmitter, but for D8 receivers, I don't like to do that. And the reason is that for some reason, I find D8 receivers are inconsistent. They're not all consistent in the way they do the endpoints. So if I adjust the endpoints in my transmitter for one D8 quad, they won't be right for the other one. What I like to do is fix it in the flight controller. And what we're going to do that is we're going to make a note. The endpoints of my channels are 991 and 2011. We're going to go to the command line, and we're going to use the RX range command to fix this. And I'm lucky because all 4 of my channels are the same. So I can just type RX range 0 991 2011. I'm going to put the endpoints for the first channel, RX range. Now, since all my endpoints are the same, it's going to be very easy. RX range 1, RX range 2, and RX range 3. 0, 1, 2, and 3 are my first, or my 1, 2, 3, and 4th channels. I'm going to set those endpoints and type save. And good news. If I now go to my receiver tab, I should see that my endpoints go 1000 to 2000 on all of my channels. That's pretty important. Okay, good. So I'm going to show you the steps for setting up these flight modes here on the Taranis X9D. If you have a different OpenTX radio, the steps are very, very similar. Like if you have the QX7, the steps will be almost the same, but because it's got a smaller screen, some of the menus look a little different, but you should probably be able to follow along. I'm going to press the menu key 1 time, and then I'm going to press the page key to go to the mixer setup. I'm going to go here to my modes tab, and let's see. The arming mode uses aux1 and the arming mode is active when the channel is in this range. 1600 to 2100. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick one of my switches to be an arming switch. And let's just pick this 2 position here up in the corner. That's a very handy arming switch. I'm going to go down to channel 5. Channel 5 here, that is aux 1. The aux channels start at 5, 6, 7, 8. They go 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So channel 5 is aux 1, 6 is aux 2, and so on. I'm going to highlight channel 5, and I'm going to press the Enter key, and that will create a new mix on channel 5, aux 1. I'm going to go down to the source, and I'm going to press Enter 1 time. The source will begin to blink. Now I'm going to flip the switch that I want to be the source for this mixer line. In other words, the switch that's going to control this channel. So I'm going to flip my arming switch 1 time, and it will fill in here. Okay, now you can see that as soon as I've done that, now when I flip the switch, the channel begins to move. Right, this little yellow indicator here moves as I flip the switch. So that's nice. The last question we got to ask ourselves is, what position do we want the switch to be in when we arm the quad? So in this case, arming will be when it's towards me, and disarmed will be when it's away from me. It's totally up to you which way you want it to be. I personally like to push away to arm and towards to disarm, because I think that if I need to disarm in a hurry, just swiping towards me is easier. Here's how you can change that if you want to. We're going to put the switch in the disarm position, or what we would like to be the arm position, and I'm just going to click and drag this down here so that now arming will be when aux 1 is in that position. Done. And disarm. We can do the same thing for the other 3 modes. I'm going to hit exit here and exit all the way back out to the mixer screen. I'm going to go down to channel 6, which is aux 2. That's going to be our angle mode. I'm going to hit enter 1 time, go down to the source. I'm just going to pick one of these switches to control whether I'm in angle mode or not. Just you got your pick. Like let's pick this one. I'm going to hit enter 1 time so the source is flashing. And then I'm going to flip that switch, and it will fill in there. And now you can see that as I move that switch, this little yellow indicator moves. Now in this case, the switch is in the up position, and that is going to activate angle mode. If you don't like that, like let's say that angle mode is going to be when the switch is in the middle position. So we'll just drag that so that, yeah, there we go, save. Angle mode is on when the switch is in the middle position. And we can keep doing that with the remaining 2 switches for beeper mode and flip crash mode. Those are going to be aux 3 and aux 4, or channels 7 and 8. So we're going to unplug the battery, and we're going to disconnect USB, and we're going to then plug the battery back in. And with the props off, we're going to go ahead and arm the quad, and we'll just make sure that it arms. Good. Excellent. Excellent. The other thing we want to do is test failsafe, and we're going to do that by arming, and then I'm going to turn off my transmitter. What I need to see is that the motors stop. Always do that before you fly any quad. It's so important. At this point, we're ready to put the props on and give her a hover. The first thing I'm going to do is bind the receiver in the Babyhawk to my transmitter. This is the bind and fly version of the Babyhawk, which means it comes with the receiver pre-installed, so I didn't have to do any soldering or anything like that. Now, the receiver is tucked inside here somewhere, and it's probably possible to get at the bind button without opening up the canopy, but since it's my first time, I'm going to open up the canopy. This is a 1.5 millimeter driver, and we're going to take this screw on out, and we'll just be very careful not to grab these, I guess. And well, it doesn't. Oh, well, I kind of thought it would open up more, but kind of isn't. Maybe if I loosen this a little bit. Like, we don't want to take it all apart, like take the camera out and stuff. How far? No. Yeah, okay. Well, anyway, let's see what we can do. Now that we've opened the canopy a little bit, we can see here's the receiver. And here on the side of the receiver is the bind button. And sure enough, it's accessible if you know right where it is. See it right in there? If you know right where it is, you probably could get in there and get it. But sheesh, do it with something plastic, not something metal. You'll short circuit something. I'm going to just lift this up here and make it easy. Now the receiver that's in the Bind and Fly Tiny Hawk is the Emax Tiny Receiver, and there's one thing that's going to annoy some people about it, and that is a D8 protocol receiver. You would prefer probably that it be the D16 protocol for various technical reasons. The other thing that we gotta mention is that D8 receivers, at least as of today, and for the foreseeable future, if my little birdies are correct, these are not supported by the new Access Protocol FreeSky radios. So if you've got the X9 Lite or the X Lite Pro, you have to put a different receiver in. That's the bottom line. I'm going to bind it to my good old Tyrannus here in D8 mode. And what I want to see is that here in model setup, if I go down, I want to see the, and we'll get there, internal RF set to D8. And we're just going to hit bind right here. And you should hear a beeping. I've got a volume knob for my radio, and if you're wondering how do you do, ooh, that's pretty cool, I'd like to do that. I've got a video on how to make a volume knob for your Tyrannus or any other OpenTX radio so you can turn the volume down so nobody has to hear that garbage. Then, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down that little button on the side of the receiver. Oh my goodness. This is so dumb. I can't even hardly get my finger on it because the MMCX is in the way, but alright, we'll get there, we'll get there. Okay, there we go. I'm going to hold that down, and while holding it down, I'm going to plug the battery in. This is Emax. Can we just have a different way of doing binding so we don't have to hold the freaking button down while we're... Let's make sure that it's not true. No, you got to hold it down. So dumb. Can we have a like if I push the bind button within 10 seconds of powering up, you go into bind mode, or if you power on and you're not bound, you go into bind mode automatically? Crossfire did it so good. They weren't the only ones, but this is so dumb having to like have 3 freaking hands to bind your freaking. Okay. I got a solid green LED and now a green and red blinking LED on the receiver. That indicates the bind is successful, or at least it oughta. Let's find out. Unplug, hit exit, take it out of bind mode, and when we plug in, probably what we want to see is just a solid green LED. That's usually what you see when you're bound. Yep. Solid green LED. I'm not going to stick my metal thing in here and short circuit something, but like right about there, the receiver has a solid green LED, indicates that we are bound. The other thing we're going to want to do is unlock the video transmitter. Here's the deal. If you don't have a ham license, then in the United States, then there are certain frequencies that you're not allowed to transmit on. Emax ships the video transmitter with those frequencies locked. And here's the first confusing thing. If you try and switch to one of these locked out channels, then what you would think would happen would be that it just wouldn't go to that channel. Let's just stay on the same channel. No! It goes to that channel, but then it doesn't transmit, which means that if you're using the on-screen display to change your video, then change your channels, then you can't, because now it's just not transmitting. Emax. If you're going to lock the channels out, then when someone tries to switch to the locked channel, just don't go there. Don't go to the locked channel and then not transmit, and then you think your video transmitter's broken. I certainly never did that. But here's the other thing that's kind of dumb about this. What I just said about if you don't have a ham license, then you can't transmit on these channels is completely bogus. I don't know why people think this. If you don't have a ham license, you're actually not allowed to use this video transmitter at all in the United States. Oh, but it's less than 25 milliwatts. No, doesn't matter. Long story short, you cannot use this legally in the US without a ham license. So, why are they locking out these channels? You need a ham license to use it at all. Locking out the channels doesn't make any freaking sense to me. Let's unlock it. The good news is that since you definitely have a ham license, it's okay for you to unlock these. And if you don't have a ham license, it doesn't freaking matter. You're breaking the law either way, so you may as well unlock it. Here's how to unlock the freaking thing. I'm going to plug in the battery. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold down the button here on the video transmitter, this big white button here, and we're going to plug in the battery. Again, with a 3-finger salute. How many fingers do you think I've got? I got one hand holding the battery connector. I got one hand holding the battery. How am I going to hold the freaking button down? You guys. And we're going to keep holding that down. And it says U. You can't. There we go. See how it says U on the screen? Unlocked. It's telling us it's unlocked. It was a L if it was locked. We wanted it unlocked. That's good. Fantastic. Now, I don't know about you, but I am 3,000% sure that when I start flying, these antennas are going to end up in the props, right? I mean, that's just like guaranteed, right? So I don't know. Like, Emax makes really good ready to flies. They really do. They're good. But then they do like am I missing something here? It seems so dumb that I kind of like am wondering if there's something I'm missing. Okay. Anyway, I'm just going to zip tie it to this vertical standoff here. I mean, it'll hurt reception, but at least they won't end up in the props. The last thing we got to do here before we hover the quad is put the props on, and if you've never done this before, it's very important that you do it correctly. The first thing you need to know is what direction the motors on the quad are spinning. And there's two basic ways that this is done, at least for Betaflight quads. One is known as props in, and one is known as props out. In a props in rotation, the motors will rotate towards the center line of the quad. Props in props out, the motors will rotate away from the center line of the quad. And we're looking here at the front of the quad. The same is true of the rear of the quad. In props in, they rotate towards the center line of the quad. In props out, they rotate away from the center line of the quad. Now, Emax has helpfully given us a diagram to tell us the correct way to do it. And it looks like they're using props in rotation. Now, they're designating the props as clockwise and counterclockwise. Let's talk about that for a second if this is your first quad. When you look at a prop, the first thing you want to do is identify the top and bottom side of the prop. If there is any lettering on the prop, I'm not sure if the camera's picking it up, but there's some lettering embossed here. A lot of times the size and pitch of the prop will be embossed on it. If there's any lettering, that is always the top of the prop. The other thing you can do is you can look at the prop, and the prop is kind of usually going to be an airfoil-like shape. And if it curves downward, the concave part is the bottom, the convex part is the top. So here we can see this is the top of the prop here, and this is the bottom. We've also got this little indentation here, so this is clearly the bottom. There's also lettering. Anyway, top and bottom. The next thing you're going to do is identify the leading and trailing edge of the prop. The leading edge, when the prop is right side up, will be higher than the trailing edge. And that's because as the prop spins that direction, it will push the air downward. And right? Yeah, okay. So we've got the leading and the trailing edge of the prop. And that lets us know which direction the prop is intended to spin. The prop spins towards the leading edge. And if we know that this quad is using props in rotation, then this prop must spin this way. It must go on this motor, or it can go on this motor. So after you've installed the props, and indeed anytime before you fly a quad, it's good to do just a little mental check to make sure that the props are on correctly. Obviously, if you just finished a flight, then you change packs, you set the quad down, you don't need to check the props. But anytime you change a prop, the next time you fly, do a little mental check, because if the props are on wrong, the quad can flip out, or at the very least it'll like try to fly and then disarm for no reason. So what you want to do is take a look at the props and notice that the leading edge of the prop is facing the center line. This is props in rotation. These props are installed correctly, and do the same thing for the rear props, right? Whereas if we had them on wrong, props would be facing, oh, see now here, the trailing edge of the prop is facing the center line. This would be a props out rotation, which is not what this quadcopter is doing. The other thing to keep in mind is that you'll always have the same prop on the diagonal of the quad. So whatever prop is on the front right, the same prop should be on the back left, and vice versa. Just do a little check. I always just eyeball the center line and think, am I going toward the center line? And yeah, that's how you know they're on correctly. Okay, well now it's time to go out and hover it. And that is going to bring us to the end of this video. If you've never hovered a quad before and you'd like some tips on what to do the first time you do a test hover, I got a link in the video description to how to do that. And don't just think that the thing to do is to go out there, arm, raise your throttle, because if anything has gone wrong, like if you've got your props on wrong, it can really flip out. So check that link out if it's your first time. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. Thanks to Drew for the entertainment as well. Drew? Thank you guys so much for watching. Happy flying.